The purpose of an exposition in a story is to provide background information. It could be about the characters in the story or the historical context in which the story is set. Exposition could be about anything or about anyone in the story, since it is usually what happened in the past that is recounted. Exposition in novels and in films usually get a bad rap because of the popular storytelling technique show, don't tell. For example, instead of saying that a character is hungry, which would mean telling the audience, it is advised that it should be shown to the audience. So you may hear the character's stomach grumbling and see him rampage in the fridge. Now, this example may not be perfect because a person saying that he's hungry comes off as a natural way of expressing our feelings. It is something that we all say, but for the sake of storytelling, it could make a substantial difference in how the audience perceive this particular character. It depends on the context. Show don't tell allows the audience to engage with the story with their senses, and this serves as a better experience for the audience because they become participants in the story and not just passive observers. But as much as the popular advice has its advantages, there are times that the author of a novel or the director of a movie may prefer to tell the readers or the audience the backstory of a major character or a major event that took place before the story started. Exposition is important because it reveals information that is essential to the plot, and it can be done in many ways. It can be through dialogue, monologue, or flashback. In movies, sometimes exposition can be done by having a voiceover narrate the past event or by leaving words on the screen for the audience to read. For example, in the Hunger Games, exposition is done in the beginning of the movie, right before the first scene, telling the audience about what the Hunger Games is about and why it occurs. This is delivered in short terse words without getting into any detail. The details are left to be picked through as the story progresses. There is also an exposition by President Snow during the reaping in form of a historical narration of the events that conceived the Hunger Games. And as the people of District 12 watch the recount, the audience is introduced into the world of Panem. However, it is very important that when writing exposition, you do not dump the information on the reader or the audience. This is usually known as info dumping. It's when the audience is spoon-fed information as if it were reading from a textbook. When writing expositions, it is key that they are not done in a manner that will bore the audience. In other words, it should be subtle, even when the intention of the storyteller is to create vivid imagery in the mind of the audience. An exposition needs to be balanced because any slight tilt that borders on being extreme may render the story uninteresting. Readers are interested in the story, not the history of everything in the story, unless they are vital. In The Maze Runner, the exposition is achieved through dialogue. The filmmaker is left with the problem of introducing the story's world to his audience. The Maze Runner is a story about teenage boys whose memories have been wiped and are brought to a place called the Glade, where they are supposed to find a way out. We first see Thomas struggling with confusion and fear and anger. He doesn't know where he is.
It happens to us all. You get your name back in a day or two. It's the one thing they let us keep.
And worse is that he has no memory of the past. He can't even remember his own name. While coming up to the glade, he sees this creature and is apparently afraid. He meets the boys and then begins to run. The boys laugh at him. He's humiliated and angry, but at the same time notices the walls surrounding the glade. This new piece of information tells the viewer that something isn't quite right about the place. Thomas realizes this and looks round, but at this time, both Thomas and the viewers have no idea what is going on. A bit of information pops out as Albie goes to Thomas to talk to him. Thomas is vulnerable and admits that he doesn't even know his own name. But Albie says that it is natural and okay, and in a day or two he's going to get his name back. It's the one thing they let them keep. At this point, the stage is set for exposition. Instead of having two characters talk about things that the audience has no idea about, the little action right before the first exposition drives the dialogue. Thomas's confusion, fear, and frustration all lead to the question, what is going on? At this point, we get a glimpse of reality, but not entirely. Thomas wants to know what is happening, but most importantly, the audience's curiosity is also aroused to an extent. The audience want to know what is happening. Who put the boys in this place? Are they trapped? Is there a way out? Again, at this point, the exposition when given doesn't sound unnatural, but it's information that everyone is interested in knowing. Albie later tells Thomas about the glade, but doesn't tell him much. He only talks about the rules set in place to keep them safe. Albie is being secretive and makes it clear that he wasn't going to talk about it. Now there's a bit of suspense. The viewers want to know more. Thomas gets sent to a boy named Chuck, who also seemed to be unaware of the things that actually go on in the glade. He accidentally says something about a maze, which made Thomas curious. He runs to the wall and contemplates going through it, but Gally shows up and pushes him. This right here is a recipe for conflict. At this stage, we can see that Thomas's desire is to escape the glade, and while he tries to do this, Gali stands in the way. This conflict moves the plot as there are two opposing interests. The first is Thomas's interest. He wants to leave the glade. Gali says no, but it isn't just Gali who stands in the way of Thomas. The other boys also think the same thing. As they try to reason with him, the walls begin to move. This is also a kind of contextual exposition, the resetting, which reveals information about the glade. No one goes through the walls except for the runners. Thomas sees this for himself and realizes that the boys' grudge against him were not unfounded. They were trying to protect him. They were once in his position. They knew what it feels like to be a greenie in the glade. The conflict serves as exposition, as it reveals that going through the walls does not mean that there is safety beyond but imminent danger. Later, Newt tells Thomas that Gali saved his life. The narrative goes further with the dialogue between Newt and Thomas. Albie informs Thomas that the maze is a dangerous place and the only persons allowed to go in there are the runners. Then he tells him to listen as the maze changes, but just at the starting line. There's the anticipation of what is next.